Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian. We recently attended a panel discussion about the United States Marine Corps' air-ground task forces and how the Corps is innovating that force for the future. The discussion was hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the U.S. Naval Institute, and Huntington Ingalls Industries, which recently sponsored our coverage of the Navy League's recent Sea Airspace Conference and Trade Show. The panel discussion featured Lieutenant General Brian Beaudreault, the Marine Corps' Deputy Commandant for Plans, Policies, and Operations, Lieutenant General Robert Hedeland, Commander of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, Lieutenant General Robert Whaler Walsh, the Commanding General of the Marine Corps' Combat Development Command, and Dr. Maren Lead, a Senior Analyst with Johns Hopkins University's Advanced Physics Laboratory. We spoke with General Beaudreault after the event and asked about the whole-of-nation approach he says the United States must take to a great power competition, the role of amphibious assault ships in future combat, and the concept of dynamic force employment.
Really, in context, though, it was a whole-of-nation approach on great power competition. So, and of course, the ideal would be to keep it at the level of competition and not see it devolve into armed conflict. And I think the best way we can assure that to happen is to have predictable funding from Congress at the appropriate level delivered on time. So these programs in our modernization efforts can continue uninterrupted, and things about getting funding into our depots, be it a shipyard that's repairing ships or one of our aviation depots, those are critical to maintain our readiness and to enhance our readiness. So that's first and foremost, is continue to have, proper appropriations from the Congress on time that meets the needs of the force. We recognize that part of business reform will allow us to become more efficient with those dollars and stretch it further. But I think it is a national effort. It's everything across the defense industrial base. It's about how we train students of the future. It's about ensuring that we have a population that is greater than the less than 30% to meet the physical standards to even enter the military. That's what I'm talking about a whole of nation, beyond a whole of government approach, if we are absolutely going to compete and win in this great power competition and retain our competitive advantage. I think amphibs have been built all along to support major combat operations, not just low end, but given the sophistication with which our competitors are building defensive systems, I think we have to look at what the future amphibs have in terms of both offensive and defensive capability, that there may not be the necessary number of cruisers, destroyers to escort that amphib. So what do we do differently in the future? How do we make it a more potent offensive weapon, not just a troop transport ship that can launch things from the well deck or from the flight deck, but in and of itself has the ability to fight. So I think it's everything from the command and control systems that are on it. Are they resilient, redundant, networked with the rest of the force to include land-based forces, air forces, Army units? So that's really what I would see is the defensive capabilities, a defensive system for the ship to protect itself, as well as an offensive capability to fight beyond, and whether it's vertical launch system, rail guns, hypervelocity projectiles that can shoot out of those guns. And I know those kinds of efforts are being undertaken by the Navy, but they're critically important to enhance, the lethality of the ship over what it has today. I don't want to say too much about how it's going to work, other than that the whole idea behind dynamic force employment is to remain operationally unpredictable, to take combat credible formations that are either forward deployed or reside back in CONUS, and to put them into locations for intended purposes, driven by the Secretary of Defense or the Joint Chiefs. So there will be some ships, of course, and MAGTF capability that's scheduled as part of the global force management process, and then there will be the dynamic force employment aspects, which is basically to throw in a different look to those who are watching and not be as predictable in terms of our deployment schedules and locations.